to your point, if it's something that you're really passionate and the team can get behind. And I think a lot of it is also tied to just knowing your customer and being very close to them and allowing that to sort of infuse your enthusiasm. Can you speak
and
to
knowing yourself, like knowing like we like have a pretty good idea of like what we do well. So like, you know, there are some examples of products that like we released that felt like more of chasing a trend, and it just wasn't really like, it didn't align with like what our company does really well and like what we're good at. So it's like, yeah, more kind of like trying, you know, like we're not trying to like fill every piece of demand. Like we're not trying to be everything to everybody. It's like we've kind of like realized like, hey, here's sort of our lane where we just do a great job and excel and like try as much as possible to like stay aligned with that.
Awesome. We've got about 5 to 10 minutes left. Yeah, please.
I'm curious, what type of automation do you guys use for your manufacturing and your quality control?
I mean, it varies so much depending on what you're making. We have like different equipment that's specialized in making our meat treats. We have different pieces of equipment that are specialized in making our biscuits. It's like super specific. Is there a certain type of product that you make?
So I'm in product development right now, but I'm looking to set up manufacturing in-house with automation for quality control. So I'm curious if you do anything to do like any type of like quality control with automation.
Yeah, for us, a lot of it is shelf stability. So like all of our production, we have to moisture test every batch. So like that's something that is obviously specialized to what we are making, but like moisture testing things, shelf life testing, we obviously get like nutritional testing, but that's like not every batch that's like ahead of time for your packaging. But yeah, that's something that's big for us. Inspecting things before they go out, as far as like shipping, you don't want things ruined in transit. That's a huge piece of quality control for us as well.
Yeah. We have almost no automation. I mean, we really only have 2 forms of automation, and they're both only semi-automated. So like that hands-on aspect, like in a lot of ways, is our quality control.
Apparel doesn't really have much automation when it comes to QC. It's like someone actually measuring the garment. If a certain percentage fail, then you measure the whole batch. If not, you move on.
Great. I think one thing that, you know, that's awesome is every business is so different, and you guys are at different sort of scales. I think, you know, Ashton, what you've been able to do in building out your whole facility without raising any capital versus Chris raising, you know, tens of millions of dollars, but having a business that does hundreds of millions of dollars. I guess knowing that this is sort of startup week, thinking back, like, can you just speak to the role of capital in facilitating some of this early stage sort of development, you know, loans, financing, just talk through that. And then if you could kind of do it all over again, so to speak. I know we're 5-10 years in, but can you just kind of take that and run with it?
Yeah, as far as equipment, financing is super important. Big pieces of equipment are really expensive. For us, it's more looking a few steps ahead. It's like, can we get here before we raise money? Can we get here before we raise money? It's not something where like, we're never doing this, but obviously the further you can get without raising money, in my opinion, I think every business is different. I think it's just better because then when you get to the point of raising money, you might have to raise less rounds or dilute yourself like a little bit less. So that's the perspective that we have taken thus far.
Sorry, just quick questions. You talk about like the threshold points. You decide to raise money. Like what's the threshold points when you feel like comfortable enough to put taking that risk, to taking that loan out? And I heard you guys mentioned there's a couple of times you guys changing ideas in the beginning of the stage, and maybe as well. Yeah.
I think it becomes, from my perspective, I think when we'll get to a point where like it becomes not really an option anymore is the pressure, the external pressures from really large retailers. So when you launch, I'll say use Whole Foods as an example. So if you want to launch nationally with Whole Foods, you're talking about free filling, maybe 400 stores. That's 1 case per SKU per store. So you're talking about free filling, I don't know, 5,000 cases of product to stores. Then you have slotting fees, depending what that is. It's usually per item, could be per store. Usually it's by the whole chain. So you're talking about thousands of dollars there. Then you're talking about marketing fees to do promos, setting up distribution. There's costs associated with setting up new item and distribution. I could go on forever about all the costs associated with this, and then if you take launching nationally in Whole Foods at the same time as you're launching nationally with a few other chains, all of a sudden you're looking at like a $500,000 bill to launch into a store. So I think when you get to that point of like really large retailers all happening at the same time, all launching at the same time, to me, that is the thing closest to me right now in my site where I'm like, that would be the moment where it becomes critical.
Yeah, we also have chosen to not raise outside capital. I think you made a good point. Like, it depends. You know, like there's not like one way is a good way, one way is a bad way. It just kind of depends on you and your business and all the factors associated with it. I mean, early on, like we were just putting as much money back into the company as we could afford to, and I'm grateful that I didn't have a mortgage or kids at the time and didn't have didn't need a lot that made that possible. But I mean. And then as we've grown, it's just like we've always really been focused on like building something sustainable that can last. Like so, like having as solid of like a financial foundation as we can. I think like having access to like we have taken on loans and like things like that. We're just not giving up equity, but like having like we're really like try to be really intentional about like having as much like access to potential, funds, like if you need it, whether it's like a potential like, source of a loan or having like multiple lines of credit that are available, like in the event that like you're gonna need it. Like we've always been really like proactive about making sure that we have access to cash when we need it, like depending on the circumstances, but like we're really, really focused like as much as possible on like being in like a debt optional position, and we've been able to self-finance like our last few like rounds of equipment purchases, and things of that nature. But it also there's just it depends. You put as much planning into it as you want, but like you're still you're vulnerable to like the economy and all these other unplanned things. And so that's why I think like for us like it's been about making sure that we have access, like like if we're getting close like to like maxing out a line of credit, like I already want to have like something else in place so that like we have what we need, and then like we're just very, very proactive about managing financially and like having a plan, being really like making sure that any financial decision is made like through a very specific filter, so that like we can make the decision that aligns with like our resources and our plan.
And in the last 2 minutes for the big guy, how do you approach it? Any thoughts looking back?
I don't know about the big guy.
Hundreds of millions of dollars in sales isn't nothing.
I think it depends on like what you want to do, right? And I think you should be clear about that up front and how fast you want to go. I agree. There's not a right way or a wrong way to do it, especially in consumer products and physical products, right? Like it can definitely be done either way. In fact, in hindsight, I don't know if I would do it the same way that I did it had I known that 8 years down the line we were going to grow up and realize we were an underwear company, not a vintage company or a costume company or other things like that. Probably could have done it with a lot less capital, actually. We have not raised capital since 2019, at least equity capital, and the reason we've done that is we've been able to push terms on our vendors dramatically, from like having to pay everything up front, so call it negative 60 days of cash flow, to paying everything 90 days after you get it. So a pretty big shift until then shipping started taking 120 days, but let's put that aside. There's really good sources of debt capital when you get to a certain point as well. ABL financing is amazing. I don't think a lot of people talk about it, but that's asset-based lending. So basically you can lend against, they'll give you cash flow against your inventory. You do have to be at a certain point and a certain size generally to get that, but there are more and more financial institutions moving down market that are offering that for smaller businesses without as much operating history, but a really powerful way to get access to a lot of capital that you're investing in inventory for growth. So that's kind of what I'd say is like before you do anything, think about what kind of a life you want to have. And again, not one is not better or worse than the other. One is more bootstrapped and probably a little bit slower, but you probably also own 100% of your business. The other might be a little bit faster and is certainly a lot more risky, but the upside might be higher, right? So.
And I just real quick, like what you just said, I think is ultimately like maybe the single most important thing. Like, I think you have to be clear about like what does success mean to you? Like, what does that look like for you? Because that's gonna really change the way that like the path that you take and how you go about going there. And otherwise, like without a clear sense of that, like you wind up just reacting to the opportunities that come in front of you, and like that can send you in all sorts of different directions. So I think that that's a really, really important part, especially if you have a business partner. Like you have to be on the same page about that. You have to be on the same page about what success means, what that looks like, and like, you know, be on the same page about like how you want to get there.
I just go back to the comment that you made, 20 or 30 minutes ago, talking about when a bad shipment comes in, the decision is so clear, we're not going to sacrifice on product quality, because the direction is so obvious, you're in control. It's just so different when you've got other outside sort of stakeholders sort of dictating some of this. And I think it's easy, to celebrate the billion-dollar startups who've raised all this equity, but at least in food and apparel, sometimes those companies, food specifically, house, they'll disappear, right? And so I think, it's just incredible the work that you guys are putting in to build these businesses. So we're at time. Thank you guys kind of for being here. Maybe we'll stick around a couple minutes after to answer any questions. I've also got your email addresses that I'll put on screen if that's okay. But thank you guys for being here. We really appreciate it.